Christianity is the shadow dragon of antiquity, and if it wasn't for the Apocalypse of St. John and the vivid imagination and work of Dante, it would have long gone the way of the dodo. But the psychological terror inflicted by these fear-mongers is the black magic of the most devastating and dire nature, and its spells are as potent now as ever. By discounting and dismissing all previous expressions of divine wisdom as expressions as a type of Christ to come, and by focusing and placing all celestial extensions of the self under the spiritual monopoly of the man of sorrows acquainted with grief, aka one central outside source, Christianity stole the divine right of every man and every woman and branded them as worthless sinners, completely and utterly dependent upon the unfathomable tender mercies of the one true Lord, Moloch in the flesh, of whom to gain the good graces of this gracious God's at-one-ment, all that is required is sacrifice for propitiation, same as any other anthropomorphized god of the vine, save only this propitiation stays his hands from slaughtering our children at the cost of our total forfeiture of our own claims to the self to his own. For this and this alone were these sacrifices done away with, although the double-edged sword hangs ever so delicately over our heads at all times. But to truly give his threats the weight needed to enslave the world by self-inflicted mind-forged manacles, as William Blake put it, he really must have a devil, hence Satan. The first appearance of Satan is in the Tanakh as a figure in the court of heaven, who tests the devotion of Yahweh's followers by rites of passion and suffering. In the Gospels, Satan serves as the shadow self of Jesus, tempting the Christ to use his powers for his own ends, as opposed to sacrificing them to Yahweh. In most biblical cases, Satan, or Shatan, which means an adversary, appears to be an initiator of ordeals. It's not until the book of Revelation in which he appears as the great red dragon. The truth is, Satan is more a product of literature than of the Bible. However, the collected aggregate stories and associations continually acquired by the spell of Satan continue to expand its power through our conceptions of it, and thus the true calling of the epic poets is fulfilled as prophets of their times, as they change and shape the world through culture and empires according to the magic of their words. Already, we've expounded the prestigious influence of the Epic of Gilgamesh and the Ennead as direct magical incantations. The works of Homer are no less potent in their effect upon the human psyche. As we move through human history, we begin to witness an important recurring phenomena in regards to the evolution of human consciousness. Superstitions and taboos become ritual. Ritual gives birth to mythology. Mythology gives birth to Holy Writ. Sacred texts are then popularized and humanized by the epic poets, storytellers, and artists, conveying their messages to the masses. This magical transference to the multitude results in culture. Culture creates additional superstitions and taboos. These taboos create new rituals. These rituals create new myths, etc. ad infinitum. In the beginning was the Word, and the Word was with God, and the Word was God. If any verse in the Bible is to be taken literally, perhaps it should be this one. As we've discussed, words are magic spells which transfer ideas and conceptions into the minds of others. Through words, Virgil laid the psychological foundations of Rome and paved the way for, and perhaps even created, Jesus Christ. And if we are to give credit where credit's deserved, then we really must acknowledge Dante for breathing life into Satan and constructing a kingdom not of this world, aka the kingdom of hell. From the very opening of Dante's Commedia, footnote, do recall our discussion on the origin of comedy, the mocking processions of Comus who blaspheme the sacred nature of the satyr's phallus. Comedy is an inversion of the truth. The truth may be glimpsed via its opposite nature, the exact esoteric meaning of Atu 15, the devil, which is a humorous depiction of God as he is misunderstood by the ignorant. In the concealed lux of Dante's Commedia, many poignant and powerful esoteric truths may be apprehended through allegorical reading. However, Dante's era was not a welcoming time for the adepts of the ageless wisdom, and they were confined to the shadows, transmitting their teachings through veiled symbolism and cryptic images alone. Dante was absolutely an adept of supreme occult realization. However, the fruits and matter of his work is more characteristic of the Black Brothers' fear-mongering as opposed to the spirit of freedom characteristic to the Brotherhood of Light. So now, from the very opening of Dante's Commedia, Dante supplants the divine poets of the past by casting Virgil as a personification of mere human reason as his guide into the 9 rings of hell. He then, in classic Christian intolerance, proceeds to condemn the entire world through contrapasso, i.e. poetic justice, as enemies of Christ. He condemns his political enemies. He condemns Muhammad. He condemns Ulysses of the Odyssey, and with him Homer and the wisdom of ancient Greece. He condemns Ovid, Horace, and Lucan, all poets who have come before him and built his stage. He condemns Julius Caesar, Aristotle, Plato, and Socrates. He condemns all materialists as heretics. He condemns Jason. He condemns the blasphemers. He condemns all beings who committed suicide. He condemns magicians, alchemists, and witches. He condemns Brutus. He condemns Cassius. He condemns Judas. Deserving or not, Dante condemns any and all who lived before the dispensation of Christ, the entire age of antiquity. This is a bold path to take, considering the poet himself condemns all sorcerers who twist the truth to a fate of faces twisted towards their haunches, who find it necessary to walk backwards, for they cannot see ahead of them. Never before had the word been wielded to breed such and spread such hate, animosity, and revolting intolerance. Dante's black heart paints the world with its poison, and that's when we behold the mirrored visage of Dante's desperation. The emperor of the kingdom of despair rose up from mid-chest out of the sheer ice, and I come closer to a giant's height. Then giants match the size of his huge arms. See now how large the whole of him must be, if it's proportionate to that one part. Were he once beautiful as now he's ugly, and yet he raised his fist against his maker, well, may all grief come down from him. Oh, how much wonder was it for me when I saw that on his head he had 3 faces, one in front, and it was fiery red, and 2 others which joined unto his one, above the center of his shoulder blades, and all 3 came together at his crown. The right face seemed halfway white and yellow, while the left one looked the color of the race that lives close to the source of the Nile. Beneath each face there sprouted 2 large wings, suitably massive for such a bird of prey. I never sighted sails so broad at sea. They had no feathers, but looked just like a bat's. And he kept flapping these wings up and down, so that 3 winds moved out from in around him. This was the cause Cocytus was all iced. With 6 eyes he wept, and from his 3 chins dripped down the teardrops in a bloody froth. In each mouth he mashed up a separate sinner, with his sharp teeth, as if they were a grinder. And in this way he put the 3 through torture. For one in front the biting was nothing, compared to the clawing, for at times his back remained completely stripped bare of its skin. That soul up there who suffers the worst pain, my master said, is Judas Iscariot. His head within, he kicks his legs outside. Of those other 2, with their heads hung down, the one who hangs from the black snout is Brutus. Look how he writhes and mutters not a word. The other one is Cassius, who seems brawny, but nightfall rises once again, and we now must take our leave, since we have seen the whole. As he requested, I held him round the neck, and then he waited the right time and place, and when the wings spread open wide enough, he caught firm hold of Satan's shaggy flanks. Downward from shock to shock he climbed below, between the matted hair and frozen crust. When we were at the point which the thigh revolves right where the hip widens out, my guide, by straining and agonizing effort, turned his head round to where his legs had been, and grabbed the hair like a man climbing up, so that I thought we'd headed back to hell. Hold tight, these are only stairs to take us out of this sin-filled hole, said my master, panting like a man worn out for breath. Then we squeezed through the crevice of a rock, and he raised me up onto its rim to sit, and afterward reached me with one wary step. I lifted up my eyes, thinking I'd see. Lucifer as I had left him. Instead, I found him with his legs suspended upward. Canto 33. But following close behind the poet and his fool, I perceived the devil in its true form, God inverted as a hanged man. I spread my lips and mute my mouth and mutter this 33rd and a third song. For before we reached the threshold nigh, I cast my eyes quickly behind. The shiny beast stretched to the sky instilled such words into my mind. You plunge such depths and now you turn, your eyes remaining blind. In fear you shudder at your death, your judgment reeks of vanity. But if you offer your last breath, I'll gladly restore your sanity. An electric shriek then pierced my soul, the toils of all humanity. The aggregate of pain and whole reflected in the sea of glass. My soul force now in shattered pool, the jest of fools thou first and last. The galactic mirror wiped clean before as I gazed into the crystal past. The ancient tune, the song and lore, the primal man before me. His spear he thrust into the whore, the flesh of that sweet mother tree. Insatiable I felt his lust as he laughed at nature's glee. She loved him as she shed her crust, a veil released and falling. As Cleopatra to seize Rome's trust in seductive light of offering. How can you deny the price of light in place of holy suffering? You mock the pains that gave you life, that deepest pleasure birthed you. The sacred scarlet of the sprites and dance in nymphs in lieu. Of penalty by right, the hand of justice wielded wide to calculated doom. A shiver passed in endless numbness down my spine as wicked slither. The coal-black eyes and pale skin bloodless swooned my heart to draw me hither. Virgil's ascent with shells of former what once was me now split in splinter. The demon stood clothed in bright armor, a blinding light to behold. Do you know of 33, the goal of blood and torture? I know not nor dare decode, my visage flung beyond the years, higher than Olympus thrown beyond the music of the spheres, where fates decided the forces, upon the deluge of God's tears, on castles built of corpses. A fallen angel shells the Clephoth, riding great pale horses. In the jaws of time the ape of Toth screams of 1/3 hosts, gnashing, wailing, weeping, wroth for what they wanted most. To move beyond great chaos wall, in fury did they boast. Cast from on high they chose their fall, seeking sovereignty in the form. Caligula et Sol, and soon a light was born, that spread in blinding spiral light, galaxies began to churn. Out of black then came the white, what once was up is therefore down. Along the way the path was right, across the deep there rose a sound, which in its full vibrations particles then gathered round, and danced its manifestation. The red and white, the yin and yang, matter, mother of creation. The fallen angels in glory sang the writing of a brand new page, where gods must rise beyond the gang of forced dominions, fueled by rage. Absorbed in knocks, forgotten grins, so forward reigns the golden age. Who shall I send to fall in sin, to hold the darkness be the womb, to feel all there is and ever been, to appear to men as though the tomb, the blackest serpent with forked tongue, and then rise not till all are through, until all are free, the great work done, the grand labor and vicious crowning, for victory is not one but none, as sharp as steel takes edge with pounding. So has my body served the plan, stretched and torn for eons counting, that men may rise on thrones so grand, in the city of pyramids built on high, beneath the nights of dearest Pan. Dost thou now behold my eye, that destroys all worlds of worth? I cry, to watch them die, I say yea, and the eye bursts forth. In annihilation the piper's kin, devoured by flame upon the earth, thy scarlet horde tears at my skin, struck with terror at its memory. Ruach, the flaming sword of cherubim, and infinite whipped energy, foaming, frothing, forced swell, pouring forth the sacred treasury, holy blood into her grail. She presses her lips upon its rim. Her tongue extends as though a nail to strike my palms against this trim. Slithering as golden serpents, she licks with glee and wicked grin, seductive, slender service. Absorbed within her bursting bust, the milky way of stars and furnace, the lofty judge receives white dust, for clear to pass beyond our purpose. For such thoughts lie through doors of lust, and liars' tongues deceive the holy. And as such lands renewed the plight, I see her now brimful of glory. The mother goddess, angel of light, declares herself as God so boldly. The stars are lost within the night, my visage breaks to Virgil's beckon. So where is God in all of this? Do all stairways lead to heaven? A voice soon stirs, soft as a kiss, and raging screams slowly deafen. But God is in you, bloom and bliss, though not the trees, the birds and beasts, nor can discovering game of wits and not on robes or skin of priests, nor the elements of earth's design, the manna you consume and feast. Your organs, bones, and blood are mine. Your cells belong to me. The atoms still are not divine, but just beyond them is he. In the next 100 years following Dante, the fear of Satan seizes the collective imaginations of the Western world. Mass superstitions and paranoia spread across Europe and the New World in regards to witches, demonic possessions, child sacrifices, etc. To perceive the state of the Ruach at this time, look no further than the works of Hieronymus Bosch. His works are not just the product of a fantastic imagination. They are the artist's rendition of the actual state of the collective psyche of his times. The devil now lurked around every corner, concealed in every shadow. Satan was in the smile of a young girl, the jealous look of the neighbor, in the hellfire of every sermon, and the greed behind every transaction. It wasn't just the demons who were demonized by the spell of Satan, but humanity itself, and nothing could prepare the world for what would happen next. In the year 1543, Nicholas Copernicus published his earth-shattering De Revolutionibus Orbium Caelestrum, or on the revolution of the celestial spheres, and changed the entire conception of the world we live in. Copernicus developed a model of the universe that placed the sun at the center of the revolutions as opposed to the earth. This was in direct opposition to the accepted dogma put forth by the Catholic Church, which refused to even discuss Copernicus' work for nearly 6 decades after he had died. It took close to 200 years for his work to truly affect the world, but when it did, it upset every aspect of conscious life as it was known. This effect is known as post-Copernican shock, and it still affects our everyday lives to the present day. Following the realization that humanity is but an advanced breed of monkeys on a minor planet of a very average star, the entire social climate changed. No longer was nature viewed as the mother of her children. Man felt he must conquer nature before she conquers him. And this new atmosphere produced the Industrial Revolution, hand in hand with the empiricist scientific revolution. Here, deconstructionism took the driver's seat, and everything in this world was now seen as stuff made up of more stuff. We broke this stuff down and down and down until we arrived at atoms and particles. But these changes weren't limited to materialistic conceptions. Additionally, it deeply affected the consciousness of human beings, resulting in a rampant shift to anthropocentrism, the focus on the individual self and personality. This anthropocentric shift has some peculiar effects. As we've discussed before, before the Copernican revolution, human consciousness was characterized by a most curious phenomenon known as participation mystique, the peculiar quality of the ancient world distinguished by collective shared visions among individuals within a group. Recall the animation of Egyptian statues, etc. This phenomena explains most of what we now commonly refer to as pagan and tribal superstition, for which we mock the ancient world from our pedestal of superior knowledge. Copernican shock brought this effect to an end, along with a shift in consciousness to an anthropocentric conception of life. These gods, demons, spirits, and beings which fully inhabited the ruach, or psychological makeup, of human consciousness were now projected within the psyche of the individual as opposed to without. Jung believes that these inward projections to be the origin of the manifestation of what we now consider to be neuroses. The people who were once considered to be holy men and women for their sensitivity to otherworldly dimensions were now labeled as mentally ill by the scientists or possessed by demons by the spiritualists. Additionally, due to this collective anthropocentric movement, we commonly came to believe that our own personal consciousness can only take place within the semi-permeable membrane of our skin, and more specifically, that it is located within our brains. We began to truly believe that man is an island isolated from his environment and all other beings. Now, the scientific revolution was chugging along full steam ahead when all of a sudden it hit the sublime wall in its manifestation of Einstein and the theory of relativity, which was followed by uncertainty, quantum mechanics, string theory, etc. These microparticles we believed to be stuff were actually made up of a singular substance now referred to as energy. Through E = mc squared, we learned that matter is, in fact, just energy slowed down in its motion, as we discussed before. This formula appears for the first time in Einstein's Does the Inertia of the Body Dependent on its Energy Content, published in 1905 and written in 1904, the exact year Aleister Crowley received the Book of the Law. Thus, one of the greatest scientific discoveries of all time appears in direct alignment with the equinox of the gods at the dawn of the Aeon of Horus. The 20th century proceeds exactly as Crowley predicted. Horus rules the present period, beginning in 1904. Everywhere his government is taking root. Observe for yourselves the decay of the sense of sin, the growth of innocence and irresponsibility, the strange modifications of the reproductive instinct with a tendency to become bisexual or epicene, the childlike confidence in progress combined with a nightmare fear of catastrophe against which we are yet half unwilling to take precautions. Consider the outcrop of dictatorships, only possible when moral growth is in its earliest stages, and the prevalence of infantile cults like communism, fascism, pacifism, health craze, occultism in nearly all of its forms, religions sentimentalized to the point of practical extinction. Consider the population of the cinema, the wireless, the football pools, and guessing competitions, all devices for soothing fractious infants with no seed of purpose in them. Consider sport, the babyish enthusiasms and rages which it excites, whole nations disturbed by disputes between boys. Consider war, the atrocities which occur daily and leave us unmoved and hardly worried. We are children. How this new Aeon of Horus will develop, how the child will grow up, these are for us to determine. The next step, democracy daughters, ferocious fascism, cackling communism, equally frauds cavort crazily all over the globe. They are hemming us in. They are abortive births of the child, the new Aeon of Horus. Liberty stirs once more in the womb of time. Evolution makes changes by its anti-socialistic ways. The abnormal man, who foresees the trend of the times and adapts circumstances intelligently, is laughed at, persecuted, often destroyed by the herd. But he and his heirs, when the crisis comes, are survivors. Above us today hangs a danger never yet paralleled in history. We suppress the individual in more and more ways. We think in terms of the herd. War no longer kills soldiers. It kills all indiscriminately. Every new measure of the most democratic and autocratic government is communistic in essence. It is always restriction. We are all treated as imbecile children. DORA, the Shops Act, the motoring laws, Sunday suffocation, the censorship, they won't trust us to cross the roads at will. Fascism is like communism and dishonest into the bargain. The dictators suppress all art, literature, theater, music, news that does not meet their requirements. Yet the world only moves by the light of genius. The herd will be destroyed in mass. The establishment of the law of Thelema is the only way to preserve individual liberty and to assure the future of the race. From the very kickoff of the 20th century, the world is thrown into the chaos of war. The first opportunist of the Aeon, Adolf Hitler, sets the triumph of the will above all else and nearly seizes the world by force. His act drew the counter-reactive force and collective will of the world's most powerful nations to stop him. This event was punctuated by the detonation of an atomic bomb over a small school in Hiroshima. Robert Oppenheimer states in its aftermath, "I am become death, the destroyer of worlds." Mass panic and paranoia seizes the heart of humanity at the catastrophic notion of nuclear war. Zarathustra, Nietzsche, and the will are immediately associated to the pernicious false doctrines of Nazism. The next decades are defined by the Cold War and the space race. With the Earth's annihilation so sure, the apocalyptic foretelling of St. John the Revelator moves towards self-fulfilled prophecy. The OTO falls into relative obscurity, financial devastation, and bankruptcy. They become a laughingstock beneath the shadow of Crowley's Ubermensch, just another abortive birth of the Aeon. Then comes a glimmer of shining light in the sea of darkness. As Hunter S. Thompson describes it, it seems like a lifetime, or at least a main era, the kind of peak that never comes again. San Francisco in the middle 60s was a very special time and place to be a part of. Maybe it meant something, maybe not. In the long run, but no explanation, no mix of words, or music or memories can touch the sense of knowing that you were there and alive in that corner of time and the world, whatever it meant. There was a madness in any direction. At any hour, you could strike sparks anywhere. There was a fantastic universal sense that whatever we were doing was right, that we were winning. And that, I think, was the handle. That sense of inevitable victory over the forces of old and evil. Not in any mean or military sense. We didn't need that. Our energy would simply prevail. There was no point in fighting. on our side or theirs. We had all the momentum. We were riding the crest of a high and beautiful wave. Now, less than 5 years later, you can go up on a steep hill in Las Vegas and look west, and with the right kind of eyes, you can almost see the high water mark, that place where the wave finally broke and rolled back. The spiritual awakenings of the 60s, fueled by Orange Sunshine, the Beatles, rock and roll, and the howl of Ginsberg amidst Kerouac's reckless abandon, nearly shook the self free from the shackles of its sacrificial altar to Yahweh. There was hope, it's true, but hope is but a booby prize. The elastic tension of the spirit placed upon its shell snapped back with a vengeance. Vietnam raged with fury in the face of America. It was at this time the environmental crisis came to the forefront as a real and impending danger for the future. But due to the transubstantiation Osiris hangover, consisting of too much blood for wine, coupled with the anthropocentric tendencies of the modern age, a rampant withdrawal into materialism is where we fractious infants were coddled and cooed into our own self-appointed abyss of apathy. By the mid-1980s, the mass extinction bottleneck was already ensured. Organic life on the planet was in for a sudden, dramatic, and drastic change. But in curious synchronicity, the rise of the internet and the revolutionary development of the personal computer catapulted us into the rapid-fire global consciousness extensions of the information age. Never before has the entire collected knowledge of the world been at our fingertips. Never before was a book such as this even possible. Never before has the expansion of your mind and consciousness been allocated directly within the realm of your own prerogative, with its growth available to you as fast and intensive as you so choose to pursue it. Thus have the secret doors and seals of the ageless wisdom been rapidly thrown open by those with even the least tenacity to locate and appropriate their keys. You may have inherited a world rife with danger, but here you are, right now, having acquired a book of magic, which now hands you the keys to the kingdom. The greatest minds of our times have predicted that the next era of our modern world will be classified by what they are terming neo-feudalism. Even Stephen Hawking declared that we have less than 100 years left upon the earth. NASA predicts a total class N collapse of our society within the next 150 years. Whether you want to admit it or not, the event will soon be manifest, and the bride will be unveiled before us all.